Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. What really sparked the revolution that's going on right now in Cuba? Our media is the absolute worst. There is a true freedom movement going on in Cuba. And the American media is completely ignoring and silencing the story. Every American should be celebrating this and talking about this every single day. This is a huge deal. And every American should know the expression, patria y vida, homeland and life. That is the rallying cry of the Cuban protesters. Did you even know that? I didn't know that till the other day. That should be the headline of every newspaper in America. We should be supporting this freedom movement right off our coast, and we're not, because our media is full of a bunch of communists, which we'll get to in just a second. But let's talk about this expression. Where'd it come from? So the communist revolution motto was patria o muerte, homeland or death. This is Che Guevara, real name Ernesto, but he didn't want to go by Ernesto, so he's by the cool name Che. Che Guevara, this is 1964. This is a speech he gave in the United Nations.
Esa proclama es patria o muerte.
Patria o muerte, right? It's everywhere. It's on their money. It's graffitied all over the place. It's all over Havana. Pictures of Che and Castro, homeland or death. And the point is, you need to sacrifice everything for the government. But now the protesters are flipping that slogan around. Their slogan of the protests are patria o vida, homeland and life. Here are some protesters risking their life in the streets. Listen carefully. We got patria o vida. Where did this expression come from? It's because of a song. This song has exploded across the island. It is the rallying cry for protesters right now. Here's just a little bit of it, and then you can kind of visualize what's going on, and then I'll translate it.
A punta de pistola y de palabras que aún son nada. No más mentiras. Mi pueblo pide libertad, no más doctrina.
So our revolution had a fife. This revolution has some reggaeton, but it's fine. Here it goes on. No more lies. My people demand freedom. No more doctrines. Let us no longer shout homeland or death, but homeland and life. And start building what we dreamed of, what they, the communists, destroyed with their hands. Stop the blood from running for daring to think differently. Who told you that Cuba belongs to you? Imagine this. By the way, this is done by a couple guys. Some are in Miami, some are in Cuba. And here they are telling the Castro regime, who told you that Cuba belongs to you? If my Cuba belongs to all my people. It's over now. Your time has expired. Silence has been broken. It's over now. Your laughter is over. The rallying cry is already flowing. It's over now. We're not afraid. The deceit is over. It's over now. It's 62 doing harm. 62 is 62 years since the revolution in 1959. You have no more left. You're all getting off. The people are tired of putting up with it. We are waiting for a new dawn, homeland and life. Beautiful. It's like Thomas Paine stuff right there. One last note about this video. In the beginning, it has a picture of George Washington, which is pretty cool. But there's also this very quick moment. Guys, we can play this real quick here on the side. So you have the current Cuban flag coming up right now, and then it burns up, and it turns into what also looks like the Cuban flag, but that was a different flag. Watch it quickly one more time. Cuban flag, and then whoom, what's that? That is, it's called the Céspedes flag. It's named after Carlos Manuel de Céspedes. Long story short, he led the first of 3 attempted revolutions against the Spanish. This was in 1868, right after our Civil War. 1868 was the first revolution. There were 2 more, and it ended in 1902. It was full liberation from the Spanish colonists. So that flag, so it's the Puerto Rican flag, Cuban flag, and then burned up into this new flag. That's their Gadsden flag. Right? You with me? The flag that it burned into is their Gadsden flag. It's their flag that represents independence. After they were free from Spanish rule, and then before they were enslaved by communist rule. So make note of that flag. You may see it being flown again. Now the question is, how are Americans in power looking at this revolution that's taking place right off our coast? There's a reason why they don't want you to know any of what we just shared. Any of what we just shared in the last 5 minutes. I don't want to be presumptuous, but probably news to you was all news to me. Why don't they want you to know this stuff? Black Lives Matter is a communist organization founded by Marxists, self-declared proud Marxists. I saw this great line the other day from Tim Dukeman. He put it perfectly. He said, people are really overthinking what critical race theory is. I'll simplify it. Critical race theory is anti-white racism as a rationale for instituting communism. That's it. It's anti-white racism as a rationale for instituting communism. Not that hard. The people who are leading the Black Lives Matter movement and the critical race theory movement, they know this. The rest of the people are just duped by very successful propaganda. So what I got here from Black Lives Matter is classic propaganda. Let me pull it up here, and guys, I believe you have it. You can throw it up. Here it is. Black Lives Matter condemns the U.S. government's inhumane treatment of Cubans. Wait, what? And urges it to immediately lift the economic embargo. This cruel and inhumane policy, instituted with the explicit intention of destabilizing the country, is at the heart of Cuba's current crisis. Without money, it's hard for Cuba to acquire medical equipment needed to develop its own COVID vaccines and equipment for food production. The people of Cuba are being punished by the U.S. government because the country has maintained its commitment to sovereignty and self-determination and communism. United States leaders have tried to crush this revolution. What revolution? Communist revolution for decades. And instead of international amity, respect, and goodwill, the U.S. government has only instigated suffering for the country's 11 million people, of which 4 million are brown and black. What are the other 7 million then? Here's the key. Cuba has historically demonstrated solidarity with oppressed people of African descent, from protecting black revolutionaries like Assata Shakur through granting her asylum, to supporting black liberation struggles in Angola, Mozambique, and South Africa. We look to President Biden to end the embargo, something Obama called for in 2016. This embargo is a blatant human rights violation and must come to an end. So it's all our fault. So they're in the middle. The people of Cuba are life or death struggle fighting against the communist dictatorship, and Black Lives Matter comes out and blames us. That is straight up 100% communist propaganda. This whole thing about how Cuba doesn't have any, they're poor because they can't trade with us. Give me a break. Cuba can trade with literally any other country in the world. Spain is their biggest trading partner. The Netherlands, Germany, France, Canada, Mexico, of course, China, Russia. They can trade with anyone except for America. And this is why we're supposed to believe they have a ration of only 5 eggs a month. 5 eggs a month is their family ration. It's our fault in America why you can't drink milk in Cuba unless you're under the age of 7. That's our fault. That's America's fault. Now, the Cuban government, they say that the rations are there to help people. Oh, no, the rations are good. The rations are there to make sure that everybody gets what they need, regardless of their socioeconomic status. We're all equal. It's just equality. Rations make us equal. Isn't that great? Hannah Nicole Jones, she's the one behind the 1619 Project. She literally said that Cuba has the least inequality, and that's due to socialism, which I'm sure no one wants to hear. She's right, though. They're very equal in Cuba. I mean, of course, you got the elite, but amongst the people, they're all very equal. It doesn't matter what you are. It could be a doctor or a cab driver. Actually, cab drivers make more than doctors for some weird twist of the law, which maybe we could talk about another day. It's super interesting, but the point is everyone's equally miserable. They say our ration system in Cuba, it's noble and kind. And it also has the added benefit that if you ever speak out against the regime, they take your ration book away and you starve to death. Make note, there's always strings attached. So Black Lives Matter parroting straight communist propaganda with a nice little shout out there to Assata Shakur. Now, I've heard some people talk about this statement, of course, but I haven't heard anyone talk about Assata Shakur, right? Remember saying there, it's like, oh, Cuba, they've been great for the Black liberation movement, including granting Assata Shakur political asylum. Who is Assata Shakur? Her real name is Joanne Byron. She joined the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army here in America. Right? Keep in mind, Black Lives Matter celebrating the Black liberation. I mean, listen, that's all Black Lives Matter is. Black Lives Matter is the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army with better branding to trick white people. It was harder to get white people to join the Black Liberation Army, but it's a lot easier to get white people to join Black Lives Matter. So little Joanne here robbed banks, and what's the other thing she did? Oh yeah, murdered police officers. Also threw a grenade at police cars, so that's fun. Killed the cops in New York City execution style. She is involved with the murder of 8 police officers. So she got arrested, she went to jail, and 3 other Black Liberation Army members went to the jail with guns and dynamite and broke her out. And she fled to Cuba, where she's been given political asylum for a couple decades, and she's praised Fidel as the hero of the oppressed. And here's Black Lives Matter praising Cuba for keeping her away from, dare I say it, justice. There is today a $2 million bounty on her now, right now. She's as terrible of a domestic extremist, right? Isn't that what Joe Biden's talking about? Domestic terrorist, domestic extremist? She's as awful as one could be. And that's just the very short of her bio. You can take a much deeper dive if you would like to be more appalled. And focus on this one. Because I know there's still people in your church, still people at your work, still friends of yours that support Black Lives Matter. And now you got something you say, oh, you mean Black Lives Matter who supports the communist regime, who's supporting a 8-time cop killer who's escaping justice by getting political asylum in Cuba? That's the Black Lives Matter you support? The Black Lives Matter that your kids are told to pledge allegiance to in school? And you better give them money. I mean, Patrice Cullors is the founder. She needs to pay for her air conditioning bill at her Malibu home. It can get expensive here in California. And also those 3 other homes, they don't pay for themselves. Black Lives Matter. So what's Biden doing with all this? What's he doing to help the people of Cuba? Nothing. This is the head of the Department of Homeland Security. This is during his nomination process. Here we go. He said, when I was very young, the United States provided my family and me a place of refuge. Now I've been nominated to Homeland Security Secretary and oversee the protection of all Americans and those who flee persecution in search of a better life for themselves and their loved ones. Wow, that's beautiful and inspirational and just wonderful. He can't wait to help people fleeing persecution in search of a better life. Wow. That was November 2020, 7-8 months ago. Here he is today.
Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States. The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Again, I repeat, do not risk your life attempting to enter the United States illegally. You will not come to the United States.
Wow. Team Biden found the one and only form of illegal immigration that they object to. This is the one group of people that the Biden camp has ever played hardball on. And by the way, these are people who would actually be granted real asylum, right? This isn't, oh, we got to come to America because we're poor. This isn't, oh, I got to come to America because I live in a violent place. This is, we have to come to America because if we don't, the government's going to shoot me in the head. That is asylum. But they're not allowed here. Why? It's very simple. Cubans vote Republican. Cubans are why Trump won Florida. Cubans vote Republican. Cubans know communism. And they're very aware of it when it creeps in here. This is exactly what I've been half joking about for years now, that if immigrants from Mexico and South America voted Republican, then Nancy Pelosi would be mixing the mortar herself on the border with Mexico to build that wall. And what you just saw is it. That's it. That's my joke. Like that's right. That's the only way from Cuba to America. It's through shark-infested waters. So you can't build a wall to keep them out. But Nancy Pelosi's out there chumming the waters. I'd like to say, where's Nancy Pelosi been the last few days? Probably on a boat throwing off chum in the water to get the sharks there to keep the Cubans from coming. Make the trip even more dangerous. Make it even more impossible. Got to keep those future Republicans off these shores. Cubans are fleeing real acute oppression. And Biden takes the hardest hardline approach he's ever taken on anything. But to go back to my first point, the media will never report the truth on Cuba and what's going on. We're going to talk with actually a current FCC commissioner coming up next about internet being blocked in Cuba, which is preventing people in Cuba knowing what's going on and people around the world from knowing what's going on and people in Cuba from knowing what's going on around the world. And it's all in an effort to silence. This is what communists do here and there. This is the Havana bureau chief of CNN, Patrick Opman. He tweeted this out. He tweeted, the Cuban government says there's been no further protest today, but it's impossible to know what the real picture is across the island, as much of Cuba remains under an internet blackout. Dude, you live there. You're the Havana bureau chief. Like, go outside. You're in Havana. But, I'll just have to take the communist word for it. I guess there's no more protest. They say there's no more protest. I guess there's no more protest. Just got to take the commies' word for it. And we'll all just have to take the word of our communists in government too. No, we're not doing that. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. While we still can, please download the First TV app on your phone. We are the only network dedicated to protecting freedom of speech. First Amendment. First. The first. And you can watch us anywhere on demand on the First app for free. Coming up next, talking about media censorship. What the White House did Friday, it's the next step. It's the absolute obvious next step of the government shutting down your speech. Play those clips next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Crusaders, buckle up for this next segment. This is the next step, and there's many more steps to go, but this is certainly a full step forward towards the complete, ultimate silencing of you, because this is what communists do. I have 5 examples from Western governments. The other 4 have, well, none of us really have any value of freedom of speech. And we'll start with our own. This is Jen Psaki the other day.
We're working to take, I should say, from the federal government. We've increased disinformation research and tracking within the Surgeon General's office. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation. We're working with doctors and medical professionals to connect to connected medical experts with popular who are popular with their audiences with accurate information and boost trusted content. So we're helping get trusted content out there. We also created the COVID Community Corps to get factual information into the hands of local messengers. And we're also investing, as you all have seen, in the president's, the vice president's, and Dr. Fauci's time in meeting with...
Hold on. Do you remember when this stuff first started, these silencing first started happening, and people were like, oh, Facebook, it's a private company. It's a private company. They can do that. It's a private company. Yeah. Do you hear what she just said, though? She said, now we in the federal government, we are doing this for them. We in the federal government. She literally said, well, as the federal government's concerned, we are flagging, the government is flagging problematic posts for Facebook. Disinformation, research, tracking. Oh, we're finding people who are popular with the audiences to boost trusted content. What's a COVID community core? What the heck is that? Remember how this started? This actually didn't start with COVID. This started with, well, really, I should say, kicked off big time with the Hunter Biden story. During the election, big tech didn't want it out there, so they called it Russian disinformation. We were told that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Then, and here we have the Politico article about that, then it turned into COVID. Then it turned into the election results. Now it's back onto COVID. They'll find any reason to silence you. And it's always spun as something for your own safety. Here's more of the White House.
Providing for Facebook or other platforms to measure and publicly share the impact of misinformation on their platform and the audience it's reaching. Also with the public, with all of you, to create robust enforcement strategies that bridge their properties and provide transparency about rules. You shouldn't be banned from one platform and not others for providing misinformation out there.
Like, what are we talking about? Robust enforcement strategies? Listen to this. I know we're like a frog in boiling water, the slow drip. I get it. The White House is talking about robust enforcement strategies. Oh, it's just to bridge their properties. That's all. We're bridging their properties. So if you're banned from one, you're banned from them all. So says who? So says the federal government? Crazy. But here's the problem. Like, these people in Silicon Valley, they don't have any principles. They don't have any First Amendment, first freedom of speech principles. They don't. They say they do. They've always said they have, but of course they don't. Facebook has an oversight committee, an oversight board. It's made up of 20 people, 5 Americans and 15 people from around the world. One of the members, she was the former Prime Minister of Denmark. The other day, she said free speech is not an absolute human right. It has to be balanced with other human rights. Free speech is not an absolute human right. Are you kidding me? That's the red line. Free speech is the red line. But these people don't value it. And I'd argue so many people in our country, especially young people, don't value the First Amendment either. They think hate speech shouldn't be allowed. Well, hate speech. And here's the White House talking about misinformation. We got to crack down on misinformation. But it's not just us. It's all around the Western world. This is the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
We'll share with you the most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health. For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear, covid19.govt.nz. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. We will provide information frequently. We will share everything we can, everything else you see, a grain of salt. And so I really ask people to focus on that.
The most egregious example of that appears to be this text which originated in Malaysia and has become a viral hoax in Australia and in New Zealand. How irresponsible is it the people that are sharing that news of a lockdown imminent in New Zealand?
Yeah, and look, that's the kind of thing that adds to the anxiety that people feel. So I continue to share the message. New Zealanders must prepare, but do not panic. Prepare. And when you see those messages, remember that unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth. And I really ask people, just visit covid19.govt.nz. It has all of the up-to-date information, and we will continue to provide everything you need to know.
It always comes with a smile, right? Trust us for all the information. Dismiss everything else. We are your single source of truth. Unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth. Doesn't that sound straight out of Orwell? That's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Unless you hear it from us, it's not true. That is straight up Mussolini. Everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. That is so wildly dystopian and screwed up. And no one even sees it. You see it, but most people don't even see it. We are your single source of truth. These are Western countries. This is Australia. This is a premier of Australia. It's like a governor, kind of. A governor of a large portion of Australia. And he's talking about, there's been people protesting a lot of the lockdowns. Australia's been crazy with this stuff. QR codes on every business you got to log into and fill out a government form every time you walk into a business on your phone. It's crazy. Here's the premier.
All understand there are some out there in the community who anything I say on this matter, people who, don't believe this virus is real and who have some pretty strange views. So I'm always very careful when it comes to talking about these matters. some of the people who were out protesting last night, which was shameful, and if they try it on during the lockdown, then police will deal with them. We all should be protesting against the virus by following the rules. That's what we have to do, not some of the stuff we saw last night.
Protest the virus, follow the rules. What you're doing is shameful. Here's the Prime Minister of England now. England's soccer team lost the Euro Cup last week or so, and they missed all their penalty kicks. And a couple of the English players are black, and there's been some racist comments towards them on social media. So here's the justification, or here's the result of that from the Prime Minister.
Our players sadly suffered on Sunday night and thereafter. We're taking practical action. So in addition to changing the football banning order regime, last night I met representatives of Facebook, of Twitter, of TikTok, of Snapchat, of Instagram, and I made it absolutely clear to them that we will legislate to address this problem, Mr. Speaker, in the online harms bill. And unless they get hate and racism off their platforms, they will face fines amounting to 10% of their global revenues. And we all know, Mr. Speaker, that they have the technology to do it.
What is hate and racism? Don't you see that, Boris? How can you not see where this leads? And there's always a justification, whether it's an election, COVID, racism, they'll always find a reason to silence you. You don't have to worry about that. So these are 4 Western nations: America, New Zealand, Aussie, Australia, and England. Canada, we played a couple weeks ago. The Fauci of Nova Scotia said that we have to ban gatherings to stop the spread of the virus and to stop the spread of misinformation. Only trust the government. It's shameful to protest the government. And we're going to stop you on Facebook from spreading disinformation. If we stop you on Facebook, we're also going to stop you on every other social media as well. We're just cracking down on hate speech is all. Which means people in San Francisco determine what you can and cannot say. I got some more examples of this, but we got to take a break because we have an FCC commissioner coming up next. Gentlemen, can we skip to just the last clip here? This is from the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, about the nucleus of the Soviet Union with the nuclear reactor exploding. And here is what they said about information.
But our faith in Soviet socialism will always be rewarded. Now, the state tells us the situation here is not dangerous. Have faith, comrades. The state tells us it wants to prevent a panic. Listen well. It's true. When the people see the police, they will be afraid. But it is my experience that when the people ask questions that are not in their own best interest, they should simply be told to keep their minds on their labor and leave matters of the state to the state. We seal off the city. No one leaves. And cut the phone lines. Contain the spread of misinformation.
Got to prevent a panic. Leave matters of the state to the state. We are your trusted source of information. We must contain the spread of misinformation. Sound familiar? Coming up next, an FCC commissioner. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we kicked off the show obviously talking all about Cuba, and they've shut off their internet in Cuba, which communists want to do. Here's Ron DeSantis talking about that.
The one thing that communist regimes fear the most is the truth. And if we're able to help Cubans communicate with one another, also communicate to the outside world, that truth is going to matter. That truth, I think, will be decisive. And so, Mr. President, now's the time to stand up and be counted. I've never seen a community more unified than what we've seen here over the last nearly a week. So this is a time for choosing. This is a time to stand with the people who are seeking freedom from a brutal 62-year reign of communist oppression.
Brendan Carr is one of the 5 FCC commissioners, but there's only 4 right now. Biden hasn't yet nominated his 5th. So it's at a 2-2 deadlock between Republicans and conservatives, which is good news. Mr. Carr, how are you, sir?
Great to join you. Thanks.
I'm grateful you're here. So first, how do we know that Cuba's shut off their internet? What does that even mean? Do they control their internet? Does China control their internet? What's going on there?
Yeah, increasingly around the world, the very first thing that happens when people take to the streets to protest a brutal dictatorial regime is that regime moves to shut down the internet. We've seen it in Iran. We've seen it in Myanmar. We're seeing it right now in Cuba. And in Cuba, they haven't shut down the internet entirely. What they're doing is they're blocking messaging apps like WhatsApp that people are using to get images and videos out. Because when people see what is going on inside of this regime, it really coalesces international support in favor of the people that are fighting for their own freedom. I was with Governor DeSantis at that press conference that you just showed, and he's exactly right. We need to have a strategic capability in the U.S. as a general matter, but also specifically right now for Cuba. We have the technical capacity to help bolster their internet service. It's a question of, do we have the political will in the Biden administration to help these people right now?
All right, I want to get to us, but one last thing on them. What's their technology? What's their technological capability of blocking these apps, and who controls that?
Well, when you have the existing internet services on the island, the Cuba regime obviously is in control of that and can block access to certain websites or certain applications. The Chinese government, their technology obviously is pretty well infiltrated and coordinated with the Cuba regime. So that is how they control services on the island. That's why we need to bring in internet services from off island to give people a direct pathway to the internet that circumvents the network connections on the island altogether. That's path 1. Path 2, we also have technologies. One is called Siphon, that the U.S. backs with funding so that people can circumvent the blocking that's taking place on the internet connections that are on the island. So both paths, introducing new connections to the island and also helping the people circumvent the blocking technologies with respect to the networks that are on the island right now.
Okay, interesting. All right, one last question about the island. I will get to those. Let's say I'm in Cuba, right? And I have my WhatsApp. Do they block me from sending a WhatsApp message to someone else in Cuba? Could they block me from sending it to someone in Miami? And can they block someone from Miami sending a message into Cuba?
Yeah, our understanding is it's a complete block, basically, of WhatsApp when they do that. So you can't send it within Cuba. You can't send it internationally.
Okay.
It's a complete blocking of access to that application.
Okay, interesting. All right, so again, what's our how could we, if we wanted to, we'll talk about will in a second. If we wanted to, what could we do to increase their internet ability?
There's several technological options. One that I've highlighted is these stratospheric balloons. This is a technology that we know works. Wow. In Puerto Rico, after a hurricane in 2017, at the FCC, we authorized these stratospheric balloons to go up. They can stay in the air, offshore, in international airspace. They don't require new infrastructure on the ground like you might with a satellite service. You can beam directly from these high-altitude balloons right to a smartphone over a Wi-Fi service, possibly even over traditional cellular service. It worked in Puerto Rico. I've been to Kenya myself and seen this technology work there, where commercial providers were using it to bolster connectivity in the remote parts of Kenya. And we saw it happen in Peru after some natural disasters there. I've been to South Dakota, where this company is based, and I've been to their manufacturing facility. So we know this technology exists. There's probably other technologies that I'm not even aware of that other three-letter agencies may be able to use, but we know there is a technological capability to do this, which is why I really think this centers back on a question of political will.
Could they block that balloon's access or any other means we have? Do they have that ability, or would we control that completely?
They would certainly try. So right now, we have a U.S. government agency called Radio Marti, and they broadcast radio content into the island. And Cuba tries to block those radio signals. Will they try to block these, connections coming in from the balloons? I would imagine they would try, but it will not allow them to get 100% blockage, in my view, for a few reasons. One, we don't need to blanket the island with 100% coverage for 100% of the people all the time. This isn't a substitute for, commercial internet connectivity. What we need to do is allow connections that will give people another option for getting a burst of connection to get the videos out, get the pictures out. So even if they block, say, in downtown Havana fairly well. Well, A, they're probably blocking their own communications at that point, but B, you can move out, you can store the video on your phone, and as soon as you get a connection, you can upload it in and out. So again, this is more of an emergency connectivity, not something that you would drop your Verizon or AT&T 4G service to get.
Sure. Well, that's very interesting. Would Cuba view that as an act of war, / where is the political will to do that? Because that's such an obvious no-brainer thing that we need to do yesterday.
So right now, as we broadcast these radio waves into Cuba, Cuba takes the position that it's a violation of Cuba law. There's some international organizations that take the position that it's a violation of international law. Yet for decades, the U.S. government has done that. So we're not breaking new ground in that respect. Also, near the end of the Obama administration, the same organization, Radio Marti, inserted satellite-based internet devices into Cuba to help give people, again, another route to an unfiltered access to the internet in the outside world. At the end of the Obama administration, according to some reporting, they shut down that effort as they were trying to reestablish diplomatic relations with Cuba because Cuba didn't like it. So will they take the position that it's an illegal? Yes. But we've been doing this same type of activity for decades in the face of their position.
So where's the will? And similarly, we played Mayorkas when he was nominated for Homeland Security. He talked about how he, just like U.S. did for his family, he wants to help people fleeing oppression. And then that was 8 months ago. And then last week, he's saying, do not come to America from Cuba. We will not let you in. Why is there no will?
The political question is the key one. When we saw this type of activity going on, Republicans were the first sort of uniformly to speak up in favor of helping the people of Cuba. Senator Rubio spoke in terms of this internet to Cuba technology. I did that press conference with Governor DeSantis where he raised it. But in the days after that, President Biden had a press conference where he said that they are looking into ways to restore internet connectivity into Cuba. And I hope that those discussions are taking place. I personally have not been involved in them, but I would encourage that to take place. Senator Menendez on the Democrat side also voiced support for this. So I do hope that the political will is there, but it's not clear to me that we're going to take advantage. There's a moment in history right now. We can't wait a week. There's going to be some logistical challenges to standing this up, but we need the full weight of the federal government behind it. That'll clear a lot of those logistical hurdles, provide the funding that's necessary to do that. And we got to get going. I don't want to navel gaze for another week, but if I had to bet, I'd say that's where this lands, navel gazing.
You can't miss the moment. My last question for you, Commissioner. Similarly, back home, we played a bunch of clips in the last segment of Psaki talking about how we, the federal government, we are flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation. She talked about robust enforcement strategies that bridge the properties of the different social media companies. Are you concerned about Psaki and the White House's comments the other day about censoring our internet?
I'm very concerned about it. That revelation from Psaki at the podium should send chills down the spine of every American. Just a week or two ago, former President Trump filed a lawsuit saying that these big tech companies are coordinating with government officials to censor speech. And if they are, there's a line of Supreme Court precedent that says they are then state actors and therefore subject to the limitations of the First Amendment. No more than a week or so later, you had Jen Psaki coming out and basically saying, yeah, we're coordinating with these entities. So we need to know more about that. I think that we need to have all of those discussions between the White House and social media companies revealed. Maybe this is just, a one-off issue that is bad, but this could go deeper and broader. And I think the public have a right to know what communications has the White House had to censor free speech on the internet.
I'm glad you're on the FCC Commissioner, Brendan Carr, one of our commissioners. Thanks, Brendan. Appreciate you.
Great to join you. Thanks.
Have a great day. Let's do an update soon. All right, last segment coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusader. So last week we talked all about these 50-something state representatives in Texas who left Texas to D.C. to protest the Voting Protection Act in Texas. Well, they got on their private jet, maskless, of course, because they're better than you, more important than you. And now it turns out that 5 of them have tested positive for COVID. And imagine if that was Republicans, right? Now, not only that, but Kamala Harris met with them. And then she went to Walter Reed to visit with some of the soldiers in the hospital there. So she's potentially a super spreader. But it's all worth it in the name of voting rights. Our next guest, Rick Green, former state rep in the great state of Texas, and he's the man behind PatriotAcademy.com, teaching people all about the Constitution. Mr. Green, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mike. Good to be with you, man.
Grateful you're here. Always good to get a dose of Texas. I'm here in California, so grateful to hear your voice.
If I had a private jet and some Miller Lite, I'd come see you, but, you know.
This isn't the first time that some Texas Democrats have done this. Tell us the most recent one.
Yeah, look, man, breaking quorum to stop free, fair, accurate elections. That's old school for the Democrats. They've been doing it for more than a century. They did it in 1870 when they teamed up with the KKK to stop blacks from voting and to stop us from being able to pass legislation, us meaning Republicans pass legislation, to be able to protect the vote. So this is something they've done for a long time. Now, back then in 1870, they didn't have a private jet. They didn't have Miller Lite, so they had to just go hide out in a room in the Capitol. Sergeant at Arms ends up diving through the window and rolling into the room to break up the party and drag them back to the Senate and force them to make a quorum. Some of them actually had to spend 3 weeks in jail that time. I doubt we'll see that kind of punishment this time, but old school for them, man. They've done this for a long time. Did it in 1981, did it in 1991, did it in 2003, did it just a couple of months ago. It's crazy. It's childish. Really? It's like throwing a fit. But unfortunately, the rules allow them to do that. And fortunately, the rules allow the Republicans to have them arrested and drug into the chamber once they get back to Texas.
Yeah, so I heard the governor talk about arresting them. And I'm like, oh, man, what does that mean? Like, I kind of brushed that off as like tough talk, but like, could they really get arrested? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, now for him, it's tough talk. I'll just be blunt. Abbott's all hat, no cattle. He doesn't have the authority to arrest them and drag them into the Capitol. But the legislature actually does. So they voted 76-4 last week, the speaker and the remaining members. And they ordered the sergeant at arms to do exactly that. So they can drag them in. No kidding, Mike, lock the door and not let anyone out. I mean, even the Republicans that had stayed behind, and I think 4 Democrats stayed behind, they are under right now the call of the House. So there's technically a lockdown on the Capitol. They can leave with written permission of the speaker. And of course, that's what they're doing until the Democrats get back to Texas. But I am glad that Abbott's putting some pressure on. He's kind of being forced to be a conservative now because he's got some really conservative candidates against him in the primary. And the speaker is finally doing what he should have done 2 months ago. I mean, we could have stopped all of this back in May, but we rewarded the children. You know, if your kid throws a fit and flails about on the ground and you give them the cookie, you're going to end up having more fits and have to give more cookies. And that's essentially what's happening here.
Wow, it's amazing. First of all, it's good to hear someone criticize Abbott as being too liberal, which is what I've heard you say right there, which is pretty cool. But I'm still kind of getting this vision here. So this visual. So you're telling me they land in Texas one day, because what are they going to do? Like they're going to stay away forever? So you're telling me if one of them sneaks back into Texas for, let's say, like a legitimate reason, like I don't know, someone's in the hospital or something. So they come back, and the sergeant of arms has to find them, and they can literally arrest them and bring them back?
And he's actually got authority and has asked for the Department of Public Safety. So every DPS officer in the state has the authority now to grab them and bring them back. They're saying at this point they're not going to come back until the special session's over. Our Texas legislature, the way it works, we typically do 140 days. That's our main session, so basically January through May. And then the governor can call a special session, which is what he's had to do here, for 30 days. Now, he has to have the guts to continue to call special sessions because they're saying right now they're going to fly back to Texas on the evening of the last day of this current 30-day special session. So it's going to take a deal in tandem between the governor and the speaker. The governor's going to have to keep calling special sessions, and the speaker's going to have to keep the call of the House. And they can't, like you said, they can't stay away from ever. We're a part-time legislature in Texas. They've got real jobs back home. They've got families back home. So they've got to come back at some point. And at that point, we'll finally get the work of Texas done. They've never succeeded at this. We stopped them in 1870. We stopped them in 1979. All these other times, they just delay it as long as they possibly can.
Rick Green TX on Twitter, Rick Green TX, PatriotAcademy.com. Rick, can you be our correspondent in Texas with all this madness?
Hey, Mike, I'd love it, man. Anytime. This was fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you, brother. PatriotAcademy.com. All right, see you tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.